Hello, you're watching a new edition of World Insight. Thanks for joining us again. And as you know, as always, we bring you 30 minutes of all the analysis on the news headlines brought to you from a Chinese perspective. I'm James Chaz. Great seeing you here. Let's get started now with our first story. Well, let's begin with this. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has carried out its second nuclear test, causing an international uproar. South Korean media reports that following the underground test, the DPRK also launched several short-range missiles on consecutive days. Tension is rising on the Korean peninsula, and the DPRK nuclear issue has now taken on a fresh urgency.
Here in Pyongyang, it's calm and quiet as usual. But monitors at South Korea's Meteorological Administration detect a big shake-up on the China-DPRK border.
On the 25th of May 2009, an earthquake, assumed to be man-made, occurred near Kilju in North Hamgyong province at 9:54 a.m.
Pyongyang was both proud and defiant.
The DPRK successfully conducted one more underground nuclear test on May the 25th, 2009. It was part of the measures to bolster the country's nuclear deterrent for self-defense in every way as requested of DPRK scientists and technicians.
South Korea says Monday's seismic jolt caused by the test was as strong as a 4.5 magnitude earthquake. It happened in Kilju, less than 200 kilometers away from the border with China. It's also where the DPRK carried out its first nuclear test in 2006. Russia says the blast was about equal in power to the atomic bomb dropped in the Japanese city of Nagasaki in World War II, or about 20 times larger than the DPRK's 1 kiloton first test. In an ironic coincidence, the test came just a day after the former South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun's suicide. Roh took up the sunshine policy of promoting engagement with the North as president, but his successor Lee Myung-bak takes a tougher approach. Some observers connect the latest nuclear test with Roh Moo-hyun's death, but one Chinese analyst is skeptical.
A nuclear test needs lengthy preparations, but Loh's death is a sudden occurrence. So I don't believe the two are necessarily connected. I think the aim of this test is to advance the DPRK's nuclear deterrent, break the tough policies of South Korea and Japan, draw the U.S.'s attention, and raise the stakes for potential direct negotiations. Moreover, the DPRK expected to enhance its inner cohesion by it.
Speculation on the motives vary, but the responses from the international community have been the same. Major powers expressed unanimous opposition.
The DPRK conducted another nuclear test in disregard of the common opposition of the international community. The Chinese government is firmly opposed to this act. The firm and consistent stand of the Chinese government is to bring about the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, oppose nuclear proliferation, and safeguard peace and stability in Northeast Asia.
The strongest condemnation came from Japan and South Korea.
It's an obvious violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1718, which prohibits additional nuclear tests. This is a provocative action which will never be tolerated.
When it comes to the security of the Korean peninsula, the U.S. stance may be the most important.
North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs pose a grave threat to the peace and security of the world, and I strongly condemn their reckless action.
For a long time, Washington has taken a hard line towards Pyongyang, especially in George W. Bush's presidency. The former president called the DPRK part of an axis of evil. That set off the dormant nuclear issue on the peninsula. In 2006, the DPRK conducted its first underground nuclear test, which was later judged a partial fizzle. The big turnaround came last year. Denuclearization began when Pyongyang blew up the cooling tower at the Yongbyon nuclear complex. Bush took the country off the U.S. terrorist list. But progress since then has stalled over U.S. demands for verification. and relations haven't improved with the new president. Right on schedule, South Korea and the US held their annual joint military drills in March. The DPRK repeatedly expressed its opposition, calling the exercises a very dangerous provocation. In April, the DPRK claimed it put a communications satellite into orbit. The UN Security Council soon issued a statement condemning the launch. The DPRK then announced it would pull out of the six-party talks and resume its nuclear activities. The US was seemingly unconcerned.
Thank you so much. I think everyone is feeling relatively relaxed about where we are at this point in the process. There is not a sense of crisis.
If so, it's no longer the case. The second nuclear test is a moment of real testing for the Obama administration and the whole world. UN Security Council members have been seeking a unified resolution. Economic sanctions or a military strike? Analysts have little faith in either.
Neither sanctions nor military action can resolve the issue. They will only cause the DPRK to resist and take further action and cause the situation to deteriorate. In that case, it will add uncertainty in the adjustment of Obama's forming policy towards the DPRK and inadvertently help strengthen the forces of hardliners in Japan and South Korea.
One day after the nuclear test, another billow blew across the peninsula.
To cope with the serious threats that weapons of mass destruction and missile proliferation pose to world peace and security, the South Korean government has decided to accept the Proliferation Security Initiative's underlying principle on May 26, 2009.
The US-led non-proliferation campaign is aimed at stopping the global trafficking in weapons of mass destruction, especially at sea. Pyongyang has warned in the past it would consider Seoul's participation a declaration of war. On Wednesday, the DPRK said it was tearing up the armistice agreement that ended the 1950 to 1953 Korean War. It also threatened military action against the South. The smell of confrontation pervades the peninsula. China is calling for cool heads.
The Chinese government calls on all parties concerned to persist in seeking a peaceful solution through consultation and dialogue. China will continue to make every effort towards this goal.
The six-party process has stalled since last autumn. Coming back to the table will require a clear understanding of current conditions.
First of all, the DPRK needs to recognize that defending national security cannot rely only on the military forces. The Soviet Union, a former nuclear superpower, collapsed largely because of its bad economy. Second, to relieve the DPRK's insecurity, the U.S. and its allies, including Japan and South Korea, need to show more sincerity in dialogue. But even sincerity is now far from enough.
The DPRK is carrying out a 150-day work campaign. It's aimed at encouraging the population to achieve the goal of a strong and prosperous nation by 2012. But as confrontation intensifies on the peninsula, can the DPRK march towards that goal?
Well, huge military expenses have put a drag on the global economy. Many countries like the US and Russia, those major nuclear powers, are cutting back on their arsenals. Barack Obama has even endorsed what he calls a nuclear-free world. The era of safeguarding security by military force alone is over. But what will it take to convince Pyongyang of the same?